So greetings and merry meet. I'm going to ask this question. What's the secret sauce to support a woman's professional and career success? If you're interested in this topic, our LeadUP Conversations guest has written more than one book to help women successfully navigate the workplace. I am Dr. Kathryn Bingham, a founder from LeadUP, which is a veteran and woman-owned small business supporting executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals elevate their leadership, reinvent, redesign, pivot, change your life, change their work, change their world. And I'm also the author of Driving Pink. But today we have award-winning entrepreneur, author, executive coach, Bonnie Marcus. And she's got two books, The Politics of Promotion. Hold on one second. I was just on another conversation and moved things on my desk. So here we go. The Politics of Promotion and Not Done Yet. These offer actions that women can take to support career progression at any phase. So Bonnie, welcome.
Well, thanks, Kathryn. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, I started with this question, this idea of secret sauce, right? That supports a woman's professional success. So what are those key moments in your journey that led to the work that you do and the writing of these two books?
Well, without going all the way back to when I wanted to be a ballerina, I would say that my corporate career really taught me a lot about what it takes to be successful. I started at an entry level. I made it to the C-suite. I was CEO of a national company. And I realized through my own journey, not only some of my missteps, but also some of the opportunities that I took advantage of, some of the things that worked for me. And most importantly, I would say, Kathryn, that I realized that a lot of women, ambitious, career-minded women, don't really understand what it takes to position themselves for success, what it takes to create visibility and credibility for themselves. I think that many of us are under the misunderstanding, shall we say, that if we keep our head down and if we work really, really hard, that someday somebody's going to come along into our office or cubicle and say, oh, you're promoted. We recognize, we acknowledge, and that would be wonderful. And maybe sometimes that happens, but that would be really, really rare. It's our comfort zone to do the work, to work hard. And it's our discomfort to really honor our own accomplishments and really be able to talk about them, to be able to leverage those results to, for different business outcomes as well as for our own career advantage. So that's what really led to the first book. That understanding that the meritocracy is a myth, that you need to be politically savvy, and it's really important that if you are ambitious, that you need to be strategic, and you need to do the things that will give you more credibility and visibility, and not just. You need to work hard and do the work too.
Exactly.
I'm not saying, be a political animal and schmooze, 99% of the time. You need to do the work too, but you also need to be able to share how you did that work and what it meant for the business. I was really blindsided in my career. I was about, let's see, 8 years I had been with one particular company and really worked my way up to like an AVP role.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wildly successful. I took my region, I increased revenue, I increased product services, I had 18 direct reports. I was working like a maniac. And the company really went through an acquisition. Everything got thrown up in the air. There was a new position open for VP. Put my hat in the ring. I thought that I would be a shoo-in. But also that reorganization, I had a new boss who came in from outside the company who was a buddy of the CEO. It was a boys' club, you know. And even though I was highly qualified and probably the most qualified, he brought in a man from another territory to take the position.
Mm-hmm.
And I was devastated. And I said, I'm not going to let that happen to other women. You need to pay attention. You need to be politically savvy. So that's how the politics of promotion came about. It was understanding can't rely on the meritocracy. You need to be politically savvy. And the book takes you through some very specific strategies on how to be politically savvy without being inauthentic.
I like that.
I started my coaching practice in 2007. I left corporate. I went back and I got certified as an executive coach. And I have been coaching for a while. And I would say maybe 5 years ago, I was coaching a 58-year-old female attorney in Silicon Valley. She was working for a tech company, one of 8 on the legal team, the oldest, but also one of the most successful. Great track record. And things started to change.
Mm-hmm.
And it was subtle at first. Her manager wasn't asking her opinion or bringing her into certain meetings. She wasn't getting the clients the same type of exposure. And, you know, we realized it was gendered ageism, and she was worried about being pushed out. So I said, this can't be isolated. I started to do research on it. I started to do a lot of interviews, and I found out that gendered ageism, it may be under the radar. A lot of people, and especially DEI initiatives, are not paying attention to it, but it exists and it affects women at every stage of their career. So not done yet is to bring more awareness to the topic of gendered ageism, how it affects professional women, and also give women the tools to be able to position themselves to be savvy about how to stay marketable and keep their jobs.
Awesome. Well, I would like to have us talk a little bit about both of those books and some other things as well. But you're right. Research tells us that and continues to describe these distinctly gendered experiences for women. So let's focus for the first part on the politics of promotion. Tell us a bit about a strategy or two that helps address challenges that women face and give with it a practical example for application. What's one thought that you would draw out from the book that women could really use that comes from this challenging experience?
Yeah. One chapter is called magnifying glass, which is one of the tools in a political toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I use that is that we really need to be focused and pay attention. As I mentioned earlier, you know, we're so busy doing our work, you know, we believe in the meritocracy, but in that way, we really set ourselves up to be blindsided and passed over.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand not only the policies and the procedures, what I call the official rules in
Mm-hmm.
an organization, but most importantly, Kathryn, we need to pay attention to the unwritten rules. And I give very specific questions that you should ask and look for in your work environment. But an example is, say you start a new job, you come in first day, and you show up at like 9, right? And you look around and everybody in your department's been there since like 7:30, right? It's not going to be in the handbook that work starts at 7:30, right? And they stay maybe till 7 o'clock at night, and that's not in the handbook either. But maybe the unwritten rule is that the manager expects that you will show up and work those hours.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't comply, will you be fired? Probably not. But if you want to really get ahead, then you need to pay attention to some of these, an example of that, some of these unwritten rules.
And, that's a particularly interesting one to think about, because I ponder whether the challenges of the pandemic, and I'm going to bring that up in a little bit as well, have not showed this disparity of how many hours you end up putting in. And is that a good thing? And there are a lot of people saying, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one in particular changes over time, and how managers may be held accountable. It doesn't make it any easier for women who have multiple responsibilities beyond the workplace in most cases. So
Yeah. I mean,
know,
I think it's very important for women who are ambitious
mm-hmm.
to figure out what it takes for a woman,
Yes,
specifically for a woman, to get ahead in the work environment in which you're working,
exactly.
in your department, with your manager. And some of it you can take with a grain of salt, some of it you can toss out. But it's really important, if you look at the women in your organization who have made it, not who necessarily were brought in from the outside, but who actually, and hopefully there are women who have progressed, who have worked their way up the ladder. What are the kinds of relationships they have?
Yes.
How do they handle themselves in meetings? What's their presentation style? Who is in their network? Who are their influencers? And if you use them as a role model, that's almost like your template for,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay,
To
this is
show
what it
this is
takes
what
to be
works.
successful here. Now, you may say, I'm going to do it my own way, but it's helpful, I think, as a guideline.
I agree. I agree. And I think you've touched on with this idea of the meritocracy, as well as this idea, you know, they there's the phrasing, men are hired and promoted on potential, and women are hired and promoted on performance, that there's this standard difference, that in addition to doing all the hard work, you have to demonstrate that you can already do a particular role that you aspire to, even though you aren't there yet, right? You're not in
Yeah,
that role,
but
but you have to
to your
demonstrate you
point,
can do it. And their colleagues who are male may not have done it, may not have the same experiences, and they still have that opportunity because of this idea of potential versus performance.
but I
That's
think to your point, it's also that the expectations we set for ourselves And a lot of men are more comfortable being more visible, putting themselves out there.
Yes.
And women feel, well, I'm not going to apply for that job, that promotion, because I'm not yet qualified. So we internalize a lot of this stuff, and then we hold ourselves back in ways that we may not even realize.
And I think that that is a nice segue into Not Done Yet, because when I read Not Done Yet, you had these two pieces. You had the structural piece. Yes, we acknowledge that there are these things that are in our workplaces that women face. And there's this piece of how we might give up our power or compromise our confidence in ways that hold ourselves back versus the actual organization holding us back. So there's that.
Yeah, I think we face two different types of challenges. The external challenges in the workplace. I mean, we're still paid less. We still face a motherhood penalty. There are a lot of things associated with just gender bias, being passed over for promotions, being less qualified, etc. And then there's the internal stuff, where we have absorbed a lot of the bias, whether it's just gender bias or it's gendered ageism. And it's so ingrained in us that, first of all, we don't recognize it. And number two, we don't challenge it if we do. And we don't see how it potentially could hold us back. But both types of challenges, internal and external, really need to be met to be successful.
And what, one of the things that I liked in is to really go back and take a look, not just, in politics of promotion, you have the idea of the magnifying glass, which, interestingly enough, that is exactly where I have this posted. But the idea of looking at what is the corporate culture and how do you address it. Now, women also have this social culture bias, right, that we face, where billions of dollars of ad spend tell us how we have to look young, right? How, it creates yet another pressure on us not to authentically show up as ourselves. We're not going to look 20 for the next 60 years, right? We're just not. We're not even going to look 30 for 60 years. And as we mature, in many cultures, that's a sign of wisdom, and that is, the life experience that we bring to the table. But we in Western culture tend to have this other view of what women are, and I think there are some changes, but not a lot. So you have some interesting thoughts about, well, do you color your hair or do you not color your hair? You choose. I mean, you choose where you're going to put your line or your stake in the sand to say, this is where I am to be authentic in front of how I feel. But if I feel authentic, that also allows me to present myself in X way, and we choose which way we want to show up. So I choose, all right, it's hard to see because I don't always, I sometimes have hair on top of it, but I actually have a magenta streak in my hair. And I do that on purpose because it's just a little bit unconventional. And I feel like it opens the conversation to why that might be a way to present yourself, and what does that mean when I make that choice. And so what are some of the things that, when you talk to women and you advise them around how they make their choices to show up, what are the things that you help them learn about themselves and
Well,
have
I mean,
confidence?
I think on a very superficial level, I give some advice about, dressing appropriately, whatever that means,
Mhm.
not wearing, midriff bearing things, or,
Right,
um,
right.
you know, the choices, the personal choices that you're bringing up. I'm not going to go there. Personally, I color my hair. Um, and I'm comfortable doing that. I don't even know like what it would be if I didn't color it. But there were women I interviewed in the book who had panic attacks because they felt that they were like in their early 60s, and they had Botox and filler, and they were worried that somebody's going to find out their age and they'd be pushed out. um the most important thing is to really own who you are,
Mhm.
and not
And
apologize,
don't apologize
but
for it.
honor who you are and honor where you are in your life, because we do have a lot of experience. In the beginning, when you were asking me about my journey, I said, yeah, my career wasn't linear. I didn't go straight up a career ladder to the top. We have a lot of missteps. We've learned so much over the courses of our career. We need to look at that. Plus, we need to not downplay, we need to recognize and acknowledge our successes,
Mhm.
big and small. And so I try to shift women to, yes, you need to be cognizant of, you need to look professional,
Exactly.
and that's about it. But you need to really understand the value that you bring to an organization based on your journey, based
That's
on what you've
yes.
learned, not only about navigating the workplace, but about, um, you know, being a successful businesswoman, achieving certain successful outcomes for the companies that you've worked for or in your own company, whatever. And when you have that kind of connection, you feel a lot more confident. And
Yes.
I mean, you really own it.
Mhm.
You own the value you bring, you recognize that, and that's going to position you well. That means you are then, wow, my idea is worth sharing. I'm going to raise my hand.
Mhm.
You know, I think I can add value to this project. I'm going to go over and see if I can participate in that type of a project, which might be highly visible, which might have an executive sponsor that I want to nurture a relationship with. So it stems from basically owning who you are and the value that you bring. And that
Yes.
fuels the confidence to show up as a player.
I agree. I think I I think that one of the things that enables us to own our accomplishments and be able to communicate them is is that anchoring that says I am good enough in all the ways I want to show up, right? And it's so and that all of those experiences that we've had, the lessons we've learned, the relationships we've built, those are all valuable in the environments that we want to go play in, right?
Yeah, I think we need to be careful, though, when we say good enough, that we're being realistic.
True.
Because I think that's another way that potentially we sabotage ourselves, um, by having these unrealistic expectations that we never meet in our own head, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
Yeah, we are good enough. And here are examples of certain achievements that demonstrate that, because we can go down a rabbit hole.
Yes.
know?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Not long before Not Done Yet launched, Deloitte released data from a study on the impact of the pandemic on women's careers. And so now a lot of the elements that played into that have alleviated to an extent. So schools are back, working moms are no longer having to manage both working from home and the kids and the school and all of those other pieces, for which there were very real physical and emotional strain on top of the work that they were doing and performing. So we add that onto the layer of whatever the elements are for understanding their career journey and the potential for gendered ageism. And they're stating that it may take years for some women to recover that space in their career that they may have lost because of the pandemic. How might women apply skills or ideas that come from your books to address where companies can help women achieve gender parity in their workplace, and specifically because they understand this impact that the pandemic had on working women?
Yeah, I mean, that last assumption is a big one. I don't know how many companies really embrace that, Kathryn. I mean, I would like to think that more do, that they are paying attention to gender and gendered ageism, and certainly the impact of the pandemic. I would say that a lot of companies are adopting more when they recognize they couldn't retain women, and this is women of all ages, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they had to change some of their policies to include more flexibility. And flexibility certainly helps women at any stage of their career, right? On the older spectrum, a lot of people really want to keep contributing, but maybe they don't want to work the 7:30 to 7 hours, or maybe they want to work 2 days from home, or maybe they, and they certainly are a valued contributor, and companies, I think, need to address that. Certainly more flexibility on the younger side as well, when women might say 35, 30 to 40 have made the choice to become a parent and need more flexibility in terms of their work and their family responsibilities. I'm not going to say work-life balance, because that just doesn't work. But a lot of women feel that they have to leave totally.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they
Off-ramping.
opt out, they find they've lost their leadership status. They've lost a lot of income. It's really, really hard to get back in. And I think it would behoove companies to put younger women with the potential on a career path where perhaps they can opt out or have more flexibility, at certain times in their career, and they're not going to have to start from zero again. So I think the first place to look for companies is to assess what their policies are. And here's something that I think is so important, and I think a lot of companies miss. Ask the women themselves what they need to be successful. What kind of support, what kind of resources? Because I see a lot of companies make assumptions, and maybe they will hire somebody to come in, or they'll buy a program off the shelf and they'll think this will fix it. But it has a huge potential for missing the mark and not being successful, because it's not addressing their specific work environment and what the women are facing there. So ask the women and then modify policies if appropriate.
And you know, when we create policies, you know, it's very much like accommodation, right, for individuals with disabilities. You know, when they begin to put in the doors that are automatic doors for individuals who need mobility support, right? You push the button, the door opens. That does not just benefit an individual who uses a wheelchair for mobility. It benefits the men and women who carry a large stack of items, plus their computer bag, plus their fill in the blank as they go in and out the door. They can touch the door opens, and they go through. When we create policy and practice that benefits a group or someone, it benefits a much broader group of individuals. You know, let's pause for just a moment. I love to ask a question of our audience. So folks, if you're listening or watching, and if time or money were not required at all, what professional role would you have right now? Whether that's a wish, wild wish, fantasy, tell us what you would love to be doing and what one step would move you towards that role. Right? So down below in the comments, I read every comment, and I'll be happy to respond because they send me a notice. Each time you post a note, I come back in and look at all of those. So Bonnie, while they are adding their thoughts in the comments, why don't you share one thing that people won't learn about you from reading your bios or your social profiles?
That I started my career as a kindergarten teacher.
Oh, all right.
So I think there's an assumption that if I made it to the C-suite, I have an MBA, I went to business school. My career is definitely a reflection of learning on the job. And I learned business and expanded that knowledge certainly as I went along. But I started as a kindergarten teacher. I got married right out of school. I have a master's in education. I started to teach. I had 2 young children when I got a divorce, and kindergarten wasn't paying the bills. So I answered an ad in a paper for a medical secretary. One thing led to another. They turned me down, and then they called me back and they said they're starting a joint venture with 30 docs for and a management company to run a cardiac rehab center. And I somehow, even though I had no business experience, managed to convince them I was the one. And then in a year and a half, I was managing 11 of those centers up and down the East Coast. So that was my entree into business. I learned on the job.
You know, that is such a perfect story for our audience, because I am forever telling people that it does not matter what you're doing today. You can, I mean, we can become a brain surgeon if we want to be. There's an investment of time, energy, and money to become a brain surgeon, right? But if that's what you really want, you don't have to be an accountant. If you want to move on to do anything, there is a way to redefine and redesign our life and work in such a way that it helps us achieve those things that we're passionate about. So that's a fabulous story and perfect. Now, another thing that I really love, Bonnie, is that you have a podcast called Badass Women at Any Age. So tell us how you define badass, and then maybe share one thing that you've learned from talking to women who demonstrate strong leadership and badassery, so to speak.
Badassery. Yeah, you know, first of all, I started the podcast because Not Done Yet, the original title was going to be Badass Women at Any Age. And then I came up with the super title, Not Done Yet. So badass, wasn't nearly as good a choice. But meanwhile, I had started the podcast to build an audience, to build the brand.
Mhm.
And I used Katie Couric's definition of a badass woman,
Yes.
which I'm probably going to misquote a little bit here, but it was a woman who really challenges the status quo, the patriarchy, who really is confident and owns who she is. And I wanted to kind of not only reach out to hear stories of women who really own who they are and their journey to do so, which is, certainly inspiring, but to celebrate that.
Mm-hmm.
And so every week I have a different woman on. Sometimes she's like, I don't know that I'm really a badass, but by the end of the show, she's like, whoa, yeah. When I hear you read my bio, I did all that. But anyway, Kathryn, the stories are so inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
And just as we were talking about a couple of minutes ago, women who overcame incredible obstacles or who did a sudden shift
Mm-hmm.
in their career and either went back to school or tried something totally new and started a bit, just all kinds of stories that despite obstacles, these women have really stood out as being a badass.
Yeah, I love that the most recent one, Brett, at least it may not have been most recent. It's the one that I looked at online and listened to, and she rock starred a gerontology, and I'm like, this is awesome because it just showcases the elements of you can change. Try it. Try it. You can always change your mind,
in her
right?
40s, by the way. She
Yeah.
got a master's in social work. Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there something I didn't ask you that you wished I had? Or is there some story that you'd love to leave the audience with?
I think the one thing you didn't ask me is what's next.
That's a good one. And I almost did, but well, this is a good one to hear.
And people call it the third act, right?
Yes.
And I realize I'm definitely in my third act. And what is important not only to me, but how can I continue to make an impact? How can I continue to work on changing the narrative around gendered ageism? As you probably know, I did a lot of research last year. I was all set to do a documentary film. I lined up a producer, and I said to myself, that's really not going to change the narrative because the people who are going to watch it already kind of believe in it. So with the dual purpose of let me challenge myself in a whole new way that I've never done before in my third act, and how do I change the narrative around gendered ageism? I just started working on a screenplay, and it's for an animated film.
Oh,
It
okay.
is so far out of my comfort zone, but just to know the heroine is an older woman. And it's never been done before where in an animated film, the superhero is an older woman. And um, I'm having a lot of fun with it. I don't have no idea what's going to happen with it. Right now, it's just a project, but it's challenging me. I've always, I write for Forbes. I've written these books. It's all business oriented, and this is totally, totally different.
Well, I actually really like that idea. I don't know if you know, but Mark Miller is working on graphic novels to communicate to young people to begin with this idea of the superpower in young children and start them on this journey. So by taking leadership and moving it into these other places where we don't traditionally communicate in those ways. So I think
Oh,
you might be surprised at how great an audience there might be for that. I'm excited to hear about it. So thank you so much for your time. And I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to listen to our conversation with Bonnie and I feel like this has been something that you will take value away. And I do want to remind you, give me a moment to hold them up again. So we have both of the books, right? Politics of Promotion, Not Done Yet. Right. There are a few ways for you to reach out and connect with Bonnie Marcus. She has her website, bonniemarcusleadership.com. Her email is bonnie@bonniemarcusleadership.com. You will find in the video description her Twitter handle, Instagram, LinkedIn, the Amazon links to both of those books. And then you can also find her podcast on Amazon, Apple, Audible, her website, other listening options. Please do subscribe to my channel so you know when the next awesome conversation hits the feed, as well as learn how to grow your leadership and live for today, not someday. We just love having you, and we look forward to having you listen in again. So with that, one more thank you. I just want to encourage you to go forth and do great things.